All right, everyone. My name is Bobby Umar, and I'm the founder of Discover Your Personal Brand Conference and president of Ray Allen Transformational Training and Speaking. And I'm here with Jordan Harbinger, and we're about to do a fantastic little chat about personal branding to talk about something that's very important to me and something that I am very passionate about. Let me share a bit about, who Jordan is. So Jordan Harbinger has always had an affinity for social influence, interpersonal dynamics, and social engineering, helping private companies test the security of their communication systems and working with law enforcement agencies before he was even old enough to drive. Jordan has spent several years abroad in Europe and the developing world, including South America, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, and speaks several languages. He's also worked for various governments and NGOs overseas, traveled through war zones, and been kidnapped twice. Wow, okay, there's some stories right there for you. He'll tell you the only reason he's still alive and kicking is because of his ability to talk his way into and out of just about any type of situation. And that's why he's the founder of The Art of Charm, where Jordan shares his experience and the system born as a result with students and clients. So welcome, Jordan.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. It's been great actually chatting with you on and off the last few months as we geared up towards the DYPB event, as well as you and I talking about doing stuff with your podcast. So, before we get into it, why don't you, aside from your bio, is there anything else that you'd like to share about what you're up to these days in terms of your podcast and other things, your other projects you're working on?
Sure. I mean, we just released what's I think is pretty exciting. We just released an entire course that's just about networking and relationship development, from reaching out to influencers to maintaining personal networks and automating some of the follow-up and stuff like that, to the extent that you can, while keeping it authentic. And it's been awesome. I mean, we just dipped our toes in the water of putting it up on the website without even like launching it, quote unquote. And we've just gotten thousands of new subscribers and clients as a result. So I think and the feedback is ridiculously amazing. So I'm really excited about that. And we that's of course on the front page of our site, but it's too early to plug anything. What are you doing to me, Bobby?
Well, I want to show that I'm supporting you, right? So that's what it's all about.
Exactly. No, I appreciate it. I just realized, I was like, wait a minute, I've been on the air for like 10 seconds, not plugging anything at theartofcharm.com. No, I'm not plugging anything yet. In fact, most of the stuff we give away is free. The podcast itself is free. So if people are like me and they want to experience the free stuff first, just check out the Art of Charm podcast. I mean, there's 450 hours of free stuff before you give anybody a dime.
That's fantastic. Well, let's start off with then some, basic questions to really get your expertise flowing and share with the audience about personal branding. So let's start off with the first one that I always love to go with, which is, what is your definition of a personal brand?
Well, essentially, personal branding is an interesting one, right? Because it's the way that other people perceive you. It's essentially your reputation, but it's more dimensional than that. And what I've found is that a lot of people think, I don't have a personal brand, I just work it forward, or I don't have a personal brand, I just blah, blah, blah. The thing is, you have a personal brand whether you want to or not. It's kind of like, is your personal brand the Nike or the Apple of your corporation or of your industry or even of your neighborhood or of your family? Or are you kind of a generic label fell off after they purchased it from Walmart type of thing? You have a brand. It's just whether or not you're managing it and doing it consciously is the question. And that's where people, I think, fall into trouble, is they sort of think, I don't have that, or I don't have to worry about that. And essentially, you're just neglecting your brand. It's not that you refuse to have one.
Yeah, one time I actually posted on a LinkedIn page and someone said about personal branding, and someone said, you know what, I'm not soap. I'm not a product. I said, well, you know what? And he was really, really apprehensive. He didn't want to consider himself a brand, and he was just really, he was insulted to be even thought of as like some sort of product. And I tried to explain to him, it's not really that. It's actually, I love what you said. Like you have a brand whether you want it or not. It exists. What people say about you, what people perceive about you. So that's great. Now, in your mind, what are some of the things that what are some of the things that you've done to be more conscious of your personal brand and leveraging your personal brand?
So for me, it's been really important actually to constantly look at, okay, how are the things, because for me especially, I'm kind of a no filter guy. So I have to look at the rule that perception is reality in very strong terms and realize, okay, I might be one of those guys who's like, oh, I'm no filter. I say what's on my mind. And to some people, they love that. It's authentic. It's charming. But for other people, they're really turned off by that. Now, there's a certain level of tolerance where I go, okay, I don't have to please everyone. I don't have to have everyone as a quote unquote fan. However, there's also a line where you're that guy who says, I don't care. I don't care about what people think, but really you totally care about what people think. And you're just saying that because you're ill suited to manage your personal brand. And I think a lot of people fall into that. I've got some friends, one of my friends, I won't name him, but he's a very, very popular author. And some of his books were about him essentially doing bad things. And now he's a really savvy businessman. He's an angel investor and he's a great guy and he's super smart. But the problem is some of his brand is dropping F-bombs and not caring. But the truth is he cares a lot. It's just that his sort of brand is him not caring. And you end up with these weird contradictions with the personal branding, with as far as personal branding goes, where people think like, oh, I either don't have a brand so that they don't manage it, or my brand is, I don't care about my brand. And what we all see is, okay, you really care. You're just not doing it well. So unfortunately, I kind of fall in between those camps where I think, okay, I didn't start out to have a personal brand, but doing the show, The Art of Charm, being involved in social media to a heavy degree and having a large audience, you have that brand. You can't just sit behind the scenes and pretend that you're some sort of impartial journalist who's just doing his thing. Look at Larry King, right? He says 10 words during an interview and he insists about how it's not about him, and yet he's an A-list celebrity. You can't avoid the brand.
Yeah. And you brought up a very interesting point, which is that I find interesting, is that, you know, the moment you start to agree or at least embrace the idea that you are a brand, you start to actually behave a little bit better or with a little bit more careful thought and transparency.
Yeah, because you have the stakes are higher. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are afraid of the personal brand, right? Because the stakes are higher and they're thinking like, oh, well, I don't want a personal brand, you know, because then I have to behave myself. I have to think about the consequences of my actions. And that's not good for most people who are thinking, I'm just going to get away with whatever I get away with, right? That doesn't work for most people. But the problem is you don't really have a choice. Your brand isn't something that you decide you have and decide to manage. And I don't want to belabor this point anymore, but like your audience is what gives you the brand. And therefore, if you decide that your audience doesn't have that ability, well, you're wrong. It's kind of like saying I can speed and the police have no authority. It's like those people who decide in the United States that the federal government can't charge them taxes and they like sign away their citizens. It's like, sorry guys, it doesn't work that way. You can do anything. You can do whatever you want, but nobody here's going, oh, well, you signed a declaration, so you're not paying taxes. It's okay. You can't do that. And you can't do that with your personal brand either. And therefore, you might as well start looking at it and figuring out how to be really good at managing it. Now, the people who are reading this or listening to this right now or watching this right now probably don't have, they fall into the other camp where they think, I have a personal brand and I want to hone it. And it starts by sort of zooming out a little bit and realizing that, okay, not only are you in need of managing your brand and trying to blow it up bigger. Most people are probably trying to self-promote, right? But you have to look at everything you do as an extension of that brand. You can't be like, oh, well, I have this brand as this person online, and then when I'm in my private life, I'm a totally different person. I've noticed a lot of marketers do this, and a lot of people who are like authors or internet personalities try to do this, and they run into this weird limitation where if you do one thing in your YouTube videos or on your podcast, then when you get asked to speak, it's very anticlimactic and your career as a speaker will tank because people expect a certain level of congruency. So your personal brand should match your actual authentic personality wherever possible. And I'm a firm believer on that. And I think there's a lot of dissenting opinion in that area.
Well, and I was going to mention that I think social media has really changed that dynamic quite a bit. I mean, there are people that I've met on social media, particularly those who are, let's say, shy or awkward or introverted. And, you know, social media has done a great job of giving them a voice, giving them a chance to, you know, write their own material and their own tweets and their own status updates and craft it the way they want it to be. And I've met a few people where they've actually had a really great brand online, like via Twitter or whatever it is. And then when I meet them, I'm like, wow, you're not all what I expected. It's fascinating to me.
It's disappointing to most people, though.
Oh, absolutely. No, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, wow, okay, I was expecting you to be a little more dynamic and engaging, and I find that extroverts like myself and probably like you are way more have an easier time of managing that a little bit, navigating it a bit.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Well, I'm saying that I'm an extrovert, and I am married an introvert, and I love introverts. But I'm assuming you're an extrovert as well, or at least on that spectrum. I find that a lot of introverts have trouble navigating this, or at least they are having trouble being themselves because the persona they've created via social media is different than who they really are.
Yeah, actually, that's true, and a lot of introverts actually do that, and it's a coping strategy. So I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here like, wow, you guys suck. That's not what I'm saying. But people do that as a coping strategy because they're like, well, I'm kind of introverted, but if I invent this online persona, I can be a totally different person. And that's not a totally bad idea, actually. That has legs. The problem is, well, don't get me started on the introvert thing, because I feel like a lot of folks say that because they feel like they want to have some sort of medical excuse for being shy, which is just something they need to work on. Your personal brand will be inherently limited by what most people define as introversion. Introvert really means that you're recharged more by spending time with yourself or maybe with close friends and family than you are in sort of extroverted social situations. That's fine. Technically, then I'm an introvert as well. But and I'm a talk show host and I speak on stages and things like that. Introverts do that all the time. So I really don't buy into that whole argument. Like, I'm an introvert, so ... I can't do this.
Well, I tell my son, who is on the introverted scale. I tell him he's on the introverted scale, and I tell him, you know what, you aren't shy, you just feel shy.
Yes,
and that's a big difference, because extroverts also can feel shy. Like when I was performing in Second City and stuff, and as much as I'm a performer and actor, sometimes I was with a group of people that were way more talented than I was, and all of a sudden I would start to feel shy, and that's fine. Like, it happens to all of us. So I try to make that distinction between introvert is how you recharge your batteries, but extroverts and introverts can actually feel shy at times, and that's okay.
Yeah, it can. It's totally normal. Everybody has that. But what I will say is, if you decide to put on a persona, and if you decide that this is how you're going to act, but it's not really congruent, that's going to inherently limit your personal brand for the reasons I mentioned before. Yep. If you speak, if you go to a conference, if you're going to network, I mean, imagine the pressure that's on me to be Mr. Art of Charm. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be Mr. Super Polite Etiquette all the time, but it does mean that I better be able to speak up and hold a conversation in a crowded dinner table or in a restaurant, or, be able to talk to 7 people at once at a networking event. If I can't do that and I'm avoiding those, what happens is you have to hide from those, right? And that's what a lot of people who are quote unquote introverts do. They hide from that. Well, how well are you going to be able to blow up your personal brand by never going to networking conferences, or never learning how to speak from the stage? I mean, you're going to have a serious problem. Serious.
Yeah. Now, what did you do to really start to understand and hone in on your personal brand? Like, did you follow some sort of process, or what exactly did you do?
So it sort of was thrust upon me. And the way that this happened was I started the podcast, The Art of Charm, in 2006. And it got really popular. And we ended up moving to New York. I was a lawyer on Wall Street. So I had, I was in finance doing all that stuff. And we got a Sirius XM satellite radio show as a result of the podcast. And so I'm on live radio all over the US and Canada, live broadcasting. You get shyness. Your shyness is ripped from you real quick. Me and my co-hosts, no dead air, taking callers, dealing with trolls live on radio where people are trying to embarrass you. I mean, you just figure it out, sink or swim. And then, of course, that sort of radio personality, I was on the air talking to people more than I was talking to people in my regular life, especially once I left Wall Street and I started doing it full time. We had multiple radio shows, multiple podcasts per day. I mean, interviews, being interviewed constantly. So my personal brand, the person that kind of was my quote unquote persona actually just became the real me, and the real me became melded much more into that quote unquote persona. So I didn't invent a persona. I just was more outgoing at certain times. And then that certain time stretched from 1 hour a week to 8 hours a day. But it doesn't mean that after that, I don't lay down on the couch with my girlfriend and turn on Netflix like everybody else.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. And you know, I find that you know, I went through a whole process myself and found that there were certain themes that came out of it, and it actually helped me hone in on what I want to do with my life. And you know, it's when I found it when I went through my values and my interests, my skills, and things like that. Certain themes emerge, including, you know, persuasion, influence, presentation, and performing, working with people, nurturing, and a little bit of and diversity. And so now what I do is kind of exactly all that, and so it feels way more authentic to who I am versus what I was doing before. So I really enjoy that. So that's kind of the process that I followed. Now, did you ever, you know, maybe struggle with it? Like, did you ever struggle with your brand, or, you know, something about your whole personal brand journey that was hard for you?
You know what? Yes, I think that dealing with that congruency that we just talked about before, where other people have a certain expectation of the way that I'm supposed to be, that's really hard because you can't always manage what other people think you're supposed to be. The more you manage your personal brand, though, the closer that becomes to sort of what you want. So, like, if I manage my brand as Art of Charm, is like outgoing, able to connect with anyone, a little bit funny, whatever, that's what people expect, and it's okay. But if you're not managing it, people start filling in the blanks in their own mind. And that's where it gets really dangerous for you, because then, you know, new people to the show, they'll be like, oh, well, you know, I can't do any of the things you mentioned because I'm shy. And then if I send them like a really blunt answer that's like, that's BS, that's something you got going in your mind, the sooner you get over that, the better. You're going to spend years feeling sorry for yourself, da 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 da. And if I write something like that, sometimes a lot of people are like, you're right, thank you. But there's a certain contingent that are like, that's not charming because I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. That, you know, they didn't get like a coddling hug from me like they did from whoever, you know, maybe they've got like the reason they're not where they want to be is because everybody's catered to them and I'm not one of those people. So they'll write something like, oh, that's not charming. And I'm like, oh, I get it. You have this idea of who I'm supposed to be in your head. And I'm supposed to be this like really sympathetic, you know, oh, I understand why you're not successful and it's not your fault. I'm not that guy though, right? At all. So when people don't get that, that's sort of where my personal brand conflicts with who they want me to be. And that's when you end up with issues. Now, before I realized that I had a personal brand that I could actually manage, it was really tough because people will send you hate mail and they'll write to you about how much your business sucks or your show sucks or whatever it is. And you might get one of those out of every 1,000 pieces of email, but you still start to think about that and it starts to get in your head. And that's a lack of sort of identity, being able to have a strong identity on your part. And managing your brand, part of that is managing it with yourself. Like, are you really who you say you are, or do you have imposter syndrome and that's driving you crazy? Because if that gets inside your head, if that gets under your skin, your brand is going to fall apart and your business won't sustain that. If you're running a kind of business where, you know, you actually have to be the face of it.
Now, let's say you do have a situation where you screw up and your brand is tarnished, your brand is damaged. What's your advice to to fix that?
You've got to own it. I know a lot of like intranet entrepreneurs and things like that. They'll do things like, oh, it's my assistant messed up, or the computer messed up, or they'll ignore it, or they'll try to sweep it under the rug. I tend to be more of the type of person that will call myself out and hold myself to that different standard, even on my own show. So like, I might even, somebody might write me a letter and be like, well, you know, I didn't like the way you handled this, blah, blah, blah. I might actually talk about that email on a show and admit wrongdoing. And it's interesting because at first I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea, you know, and doing that. And I just thought it was a cool thing to do just from my own perspective. And I got floods of emails from people that were like, wow, if you can be that vulnerable with people that you don't even know through the microphone, I don't have any more excuses not doing it myself. And that turned into this weird learning experience for just thousands of people, that I totally, I mean, it caught me completely by surprise. And that I thought was really interesting. So now I'm like, oh, anytime we screw up, like if we send like a bad email out or something like that, I'll just own it. I'll send another email that's like, hey, sorry, that email came across really poorly and the link was broken. Like, we got to get our ish together. Sorry for any inconvenience, and I might even make like a bonus thing for people if it's a real gaffe, So
No, that's great stuff. And you know, let's turn the conversation in another direction. How do we take you do the art of charm, and you do a lot of leadership stuff. So how do we take personal branding and how is it important to connecting with people?
Well, first of all, it's your first impression. And this is one of the things that I think is really interesting and why I'm telling people you have a personal brand, whether you know it or not. If someone says, hey, you're going to meet Bobby Umar, now they might Google you. They might not care at all to do that. They might ask questions. What do you think is the first impression that comes up where people search for you or ask about you? Because that's your personal brand. It's just your reputation. And for some of us, it's more formal because we need to manage it online. For the average Joe, it doesn't really matter as much. If you Google, my dad's name, nothing's going to show up, right? But if you Google you or me, there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of results. And we have to make sure that we're in those because that's what people are seeing. If they're doing, even if they're just putting us into Gmail and our reportive LinkedIn profile shows up. You ever do this? Let me ask you this. You ever do that? Do you use Reportive at all in Gmail or anything like that?
Do I use what, sorry? Or Reportive? Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so how sometimes you'll put someone's email in and it's like a cool headshot and it looks good and you're like, oh, that's interesting. That must be their headshot. And other times someone emails you or you email them and it's like this weird picture. They like took a picture of their foot in a flip-flop with a toe ring, or they're like leaning into the camera and they're making like a weird face and it's all dark and they're like using like an orange light. And you're thinking, they never intended for anyone else to see that. Like, this is their Skype picture that they used with like their ex-girlfriend, and that was the only person who would ever see it. And now it's their reportive profile photo, and they have no idea. Yeah. You ever notice that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about when people are like, I don't have a personal brand. You do. It's just that now you're the toe ring dude or whatever, or you're the guy who like tried to take a brooding picture to look tough and it looks ridiculous and it's been there for 5 years. These are the things these are the gaffes that people make, and unfortunately that's your first impression. So now my first impression is you're kind of a putz, or just you don't. And if it's a business situation, like if you're trying to do business with me and I see that, I'm thinking, wow, if this is how you represent yourself, you're not doing any deal where my name is on it because you're going to blow it.
Yeah, I was going to email for somebody that wanted to do some email marketing for me, right? And build up a profile for me. And I thought that's interesting. So I saw the reported profile on the side, and there was like nothing there. Like I saw no picture, I saw no information, didn't seem to have a link to profile. And so I just questioned him right away. So you know what? Do you have any online profiles anywhere? And he's like, well, I'm not really on there very much. And I said, well, that's an issue for me. Because it's like you're trying to help me build my brand via email marketing and digital marketing and getting a brand out there, and you have nothing on yourself. It's like having a fitness trainer who's really, really overweight and unhealthy. How's that aspirational? That's a brand. That's a reputation that they're having that doesn't inspire me.
So, exactly. Yeah. And they might not even realize it's there. So I try to be a little bit understanding, but I can't help it. Right? It's human nature to judge right when at the first impression, and anybody who says they don't do that is just ignoring their gut and ignoring biology. So that's why I think it's really interesting for people to look at this, because you are making a first impression. Like if somebody Googles me, and I've had this happen too. One of my clients a long time ago was like one of these yutsy, and I don't normally talk this way about clients at all, but in fact, I should say a guy that we fired as a client. He was one of these like pickup artist guys. Yeah. And so he would say things like, hey, I can't put my name on there because when girls Google me, like they won't date me anymore. And I'm like, your personal brand is so toxic that when you say your name and someone Googles you, they will never speak with you again. What does that say about you? What does that say about your brand? Right.
Yeah, and as I always say, I define personal branding as what's the promise you deliver to people. So when the promise is that you're creepy or awkward or whatever, that's obviously saying something bad, and you need to maybe adjust it or be cognizant of it to deal with it. So um, now, what about let's talk about leadership a bit because I love that topic. So um, how is personal branding relevant or important to leadership?
Personal branding, of course, with leadership makes sense because, again, it's the impression that everyone is getting of you. So it, unfortunately, inside or outside of an organization, the problem is, if you get bad press or if you get a bad rep in some way, that's going to affect your ability to lead because it could affect your credibility. It could affect the first impression that new hires have from you. Or if you're running a small team, that same personal brand online. I mean, you see these startup founders try to be authoritative or try to be, fit into their startup culture. And then if something shows up that's counter to that, it's really visible now. It's not like it has to be published in an expose in the paper or gossip has to travel. Your own coworkers are getting Google alerts for you.
Right. Wow. Hmm. Well, Jordan, you're giving some amazing information here, and I think we're really happy to have your expertise. Um, Maybe let me just ask you one kind of final question, and then we'll kind of get to the end of this chat. Um, you know, when it comes to your personal brand, I mean, you've done a really good job both in terms of what you've done online as well as with your podcast and the things that you're doing. Um, can you share a story of maybe something where you actually failed with your personal brand, maybe as an entrepreneur in the struggle?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we first started the company years and years ago, we started it as a sort of like dating, relationships thing for men. And that was great. It was great. We wanted to be an alternative to like creepy pickup guys, to bad dating coaches that didn't know what they were talking about, to ineffective matchmakers. And it worked really well for a time. But unfortunately, the controversial stuff is more popular than the non-controversial stuff. So what happened was a lot of people were like, "Oh, like that book, The Game, or whatever." Or we're like, "No," or they're like, "Oh, that like that show on VH1," and we're like, "Oh God, we can't escape this." The negative gravity from that niche being so repulsive and repugnant to so many people, anything we do that has to do with that is instantly going to smack of pickup artist stuff, no matter how wholesome. I mean, we could be friggin' priests. We could be all rabbis and priests over here, and people would be like, "Oh, you must be sleazebags like these other guys." So we had to fully and totally rebrand. We made the mistake of thinking we can be the different guys, and everybody will get that. And the truth of the matter is, no. If you're hanging out with a bunch of people colored red, and you're like, "No, but we're Pantone," nobody cares. So you have to do your own thing. It's got to be so different from everybody else, or it has to be like other people that you want other people to associate you with. Because people who don't totally get what you do, and even some that do, will always put you in a bucket or a box, and they will associate you with other things they already know. And if those things are good, then you win, and then you can differentiate from there. But if they're bad, you will never succeed in escaping that black hole. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. That's great insights. All right. Well, you know what? I don't want to take more of your time. I do appreciate you coming on board to share some of your thoughts. We're going to showcase this for a lot of people at the DYPB conference. We wish you could be there, and hopefully someday we'll get you out there. We'd love to have you. Can you maybe share anything? Is there anything you would like to plug, or anything you would like to share with people? I mean, obviously, I'm actually going to, just for everyone's information, I'm going to be part of Jordan's podcast. I'm doing something with him on October 1st. But if there's anything else you'd like to share, I'd love to share that now with the people listening to this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just listen to the Art of Charm podcast if that's something you guys are interested in. It's audio, it's free. Alternately, we have our networking and relationship development product available at theartofcharm.com. Or if they're more into reading, theartofcharm.com is a blog and tons of free stuff on the website as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jordan. And Listen, if there's anything else I can do for you, my friend, you let me know. And I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise. You're doing some great work with your charm and the podcast. And I actually can't wait to do my podcast with you.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks so much, Jordan.